Good morning, everyone in Australia, and welcome to everyone listening across the world this evening. It is Wednesday midweek in Australia and Tuesday evening for the rest of the world. Just a reminder, if you're listening live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, we have the lovely Payo waiting to take your comments and questions and to send you links regarding today's show. Now, don't forget, if you miss any of these shows, you can catch them up on Binge TV networks in the USA and on the Tony TV channel app on all Roku, LG, and Samsung smart TVs across the planet. This is my co-hosted show with the gorgeous Kez Wickham St. George. A Conversation with Kez is a show about authors, produced by authors, and about all things to do with books, writing, and authors. And we try and fit in a little bit of art where we can. Kez is an international bestseller in her own right, and she believes passionately in helping people tell their stories through writing. Not only does she write bestsellers in her spare time, she also coaches and helps aspiring authors get their books out and done. Today we have another show favourite with us. Not only is Sonee the co-author of The Colours of Me, but she has an amazingly beautiful poetry book called Embody. Now, Sonee is a cross-cultural seeker of deep knowing. She writes stories of self-discovery to encourage people to accept themselves as who they are and live life on their own terms. Her tales of her characters' definitive moments are on their life journey. The mystical and spiritual are interwoven into her storytelling and also her multicultural background. Sonee is of Indian descent, born in Mexico, raised in Colombia, and now resides in the United States, which gives her an amazing life perspective. Sonee loves traveling, reading, writing, and indulging in meditation, yoga, and aromatherapy. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Biology and Society, a Master of Management in Hospitality with Cornell University, a Master of Science in Complementary Alternative Medicine from American College of Healthcare Sciences, and she's currently pursuing a Doctor of Divinity with the University of Metaphysical Sciences. How glorious does that sound? A Doctor of Divinity. She's worked in hospitality before practicing as a wellness coach. She's certified as an integrative nutritional health coach, an international certified health coach, a Reiki master, registered aromatherapist, certified crystal energy guide intuitive, and an angel guide. And with all of that, she still manages to write and educate and has now produced her first of 3 poetry books called Embody. So welcome to the show, Sonee. Good morning, Kez. I'm so glad to have both of you here today. I'm going to hand over the reins to Kez for a while and let them chat. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Tony. Good morning, Sonee.
Good evening to me, but good morning to you, ladies.
You're looking well,
We forget
Sonee.
about that, don't we?
Thank you.
Sonee, I'd like to ask you a question. So can we start at the beginning? You talk about your journey up to this point in time. So what could you tell the audience about your journey? What brought you into writing? What brought you into studying divinity? Let us know who Sonee is.
Well, my journey is a journey of self-discovery. That is why I write about those topics, because I feel as if I went through my life sort of following whatever opportunities came to me, and I did seize them. But it wasn't until I turned to writing that I started wanting to reveal what it is that I wanted for myself, as opposed to just either what I thought other people wanted of me, or the opportunities that presented themselves. And this was part of the reason that for me in particular, writing and spirituality or whatever I've done have been sort of joined practices because my foray into writing for myself was self-reflection, introspection, and a lot of it came from a lot of the studies that I went into. I would read things and then kind of sit back and consider what that was for me. And it was through that process that I started wanting to write stories, so that it wasn't just my own self-reflection, but also expression of what I was learning about myself.
Mm. And did you find that as you were learning about yourself, you went deeper and deeper into who you were?
Oh, absolutely. And that was one of the things that I think writing did for me, was that it opened up I guess a way for me to learn to learn about myself, to learn about who I was, what my interests were, what brought me joy, what brought me passion. In fact, I used to wonder how it was that people could feel passionate about what they did. I was enthusiastic, but not necessarily passionate until I found writing. And it wasn't until that point that it all sort of came together. But that wouldn't have happened, if I didn't have that opportunity for self-reflection.
Yeah, I agree. Tony.
Sonee, you've got such wonderful certifications and qualifications. And as I mentioned in the intro, you're now studying Doctor of Divinity. Can you tell, and you've got an Indian background and a diverse travel history and life experience. What do those particular practices mean to you in terms of did you discover them as you went along? Did that encourage you to go deeper into certain practices? And how did you integrate that into your writing?
I would say I discovered them as I went along. A lot of it came either from my family background or from travel or from growing up in Colombia, because there just is an affinity towards a lot of that type of, I would say, either alternative healing or that kind of sort of exploration. And then when I started working in hospitality, I specifically was focused on spas and wellness centers. And that also brought in, exposure to a lot of healing modalities that then I wanted to explore for myself. It was also a process of self-discovery, in the sense that in trying to figure out what brought me joy and what brought me passion, I just started looking at anything and everything that presented itself to me. And became, I guess, a student, just really in search for what was what brought me deeper meaning. And so, because it's all part of my life, it comes into my writing, and it's something that I incorporate, either characteristics that my characters have or things that they decide to explore themselves. And so that's how I share a lot of the knowledge, I guess, or the lessons that I've acquired.
Fantastic. Kez?
Sonee, I've read Empower and I loved it, as you know. But what I liked about it was you had little wee, like, ditties in there. I don't know if it was a ditty is like 6 lines, but the one about cup of tea, I loved it because I could almost sing along with it. It was just amazing. The way you wrote, such deepness, and 3 pages along, we'd have a light-hearted laugh along with me. And I really saw inside Sonee. So when you wrote the book, you went into your foray of poetry writing, what prompted you to write in that? Because there's 6 different genres in there. There's light-hearted, there's sad, there's fullness, there's love, there's despair. And I know that's what poets do, because I've written a little bit of poetry, but I try and keep it light-hearted. And suddenly, when I read your book, I realized I don't have to be light-hearted about it. I can be sad and put that onto paper as well. I can be I can be anything, and put that into a poetry form. So what led you into writing such a bountiful book?
It is a great question, Kez. And I'll tell you honestly, when I started writing poetry, I didn't intend to do anything with it, in the sense that the poetry just became a form of me to express what was going on in my life, in my day to day. And sometimes there were deep moments, sometimes there were sad moments, sometimes there were light moments. Sometimes I was drinking a cup of tea and that spurred, a sort of a lighthearted type of poem. And I think in the process of writing, I was just open to life experiences in a way that I had not been before. What was interesting in terms of the poetry is that it opened up even a connection within myself that I wasn't aware of, and a form of expression that I hadn't allowed for myself. And it just came in whatever came, and that's why there's such a range of poetry, because I think it just reflects life. I mean, we don't always have happy moments and sad moments and angry moments or whatever. It's kind of a cycle and an ebb and flow, and that's what I put out. And that's kind of what I was opening myself up to express.
I noticed the difference between one of the poems that I wrote a long time ago and and it was about friendships. And I thought different words meant the same thing. And that's what fascinates me about writers, authors, anyone that does poetry or stories. We write so differently, but at the end of the day, it's the same message. It's like friendship comes from family and friendship. It makes the world tick over, doesn't it? I just loved your book. It was a beautiful book. So thank you for bringing that into the world. It was like giving birth, and I watched you give birth, and I thought this is going to be painful. It was.
And it was. I mean, it's a beautiful book.
It is. It's a beautiful
book. It took a while to get there.
Yeah. But I've read it. In fact, it wouldn't be wrong to say every day it's on my desk and I'll pick it up and I'll think, oh yeah, I'll read a poem. And it's between calls and work, it's my 5-minute go-to. So that, I mean, I've got a wonderful husband who rushes in at certain hours and hands me a cup on my desk and says, drink. You need fluids before you look like a raisin. So it's like it's my 5-minute go-to, and I just adore it. It's a beautiful book. It's not going anywhere. People have said, can I take it and read it? Normally I say yes, but this is no. It's like I hold it really. No, this is my go-to. So yeah, it's a fabulous book.
Well, thank you. You have no idea what it means to me to hear you say that, especially because I think, as writers or authors, we put our work out there and it's our self-expression, but we don't, once it goes out there, it's up to the reader to interpret whatever it is that they want to interpret and take away what it is that they take away. And so, you sort of lift your hands up and say, it's not in my hands anymore.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that, writing and getting it done and then releasing it into the world with no control over what the outcome's going to be. Sonee, did it surprise you that the poetry flowed from you and that it was different from novel writing?
Absolutely. I did not expect it at all. I've always loved reading poetry. I've enjoyed sort of the snippets that I feel poetry is able to convey, because it's a moment in time, and when you're working on a novel or you're working in a story, you're trying to sort of convey progression, whereas in a poem is just short and sweet, and sometimes it can be about something more extensive, but usually it's something about just short. And I didn't think that I had it in me to write poetry. And in fact, I came upon it in in an accidental way, one could say, because it was through some of this writing that I do for myself that I realized that a lot of the lines that I was writing or the sentences sounded sort of like lyrical. And when I sat back and read them and started putting them out in stanzas, that's when it hit me that I was writing poetry. And once that shift happened, that I said, oh wow, I think I have a poem. I think I inadvertently opened up myself to poetry in a way that I didn't foresee. Before I knew, everything was a poem. Everything was.
It gets like that. Yeah.
And so, Sonee, they just flowed from you over that period of time. They just kept coming, and they just kept. Because I'm not a poetry writer, so I can't imagine what that process is like. And to hear you say that it took you by surprise and then it just flowed from you, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they just kept flowing. Poetry, unlike novel writing, I don't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a poem today. They just come, and they come in the most unexpected times, places. I mean, I could be reading something and I think of a poem. I could be watching something. I could be having a conversation with somebody. I could be sitting out somewhere, and they come. The only time I actually have, for instance, a dedicated time for the poems is when I'm editing, because I do edit quite a lot. I don't just share the first thing that comes out, because that usually is not that good.
Why not? Why ever not?
So when I do sit down and sort of edit the poems, that's when I say, okay, now I'm going to work on the poems. But when they first come, I think once I shifted my mindset into recognizing that I did have the ability to write poetry, I just allowed that kind of inspiration to happen. And so now I don't, for instance, I wrote maybe 6 poems in the last 2 days, but I haven't written a single poem in 2 months prior to.
Yeah, that's the way it happens. It's like we open a door.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you open a door, like all of a sudden there's this influx of, whoa, what is happening? But then you're quiet for a long time, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
I
must admit, it's the process of writing poetry differs from writing novels. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that's when, I can sit down and say, okay, I'm going to work on my novel now. And I don't have to have, not that I don't need the inspiration. Of course I do need the inspiration, but it's just a different process. And I think with the novel writing, I mean, I do incorporate, and I think we all do incorporate our own lives into the novel. And so you're trying to think back to certain situations or certain circumstances and portray that on paper. Whereas for me, at least, the poem is what is happening in this moment right now. And so it's a different creative process.
Certainly is. I found when I started writing poetry, the heart came into it a lot, because I was here in Australia, totally on my own. All my family lived across in New Zealand, and I found the heart coming into it big time there. And it was always the magic wishing hour in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. But as you said, I could be on the train going to work in town in Perth City, and it was frustrating because I had this rhyme. And it was almost in time for the wheels, and it was like the old things that used to teach your kids when they got on the train. I think I can, and time to that. It was a cadence, and so. Yeah, I agree with you. It happens like when you haven't got a notebook, all hell breaks out. You want to scratch it on the wall. I've got this poem. What do I do with it? I want to give birth, and it's like, I always carry a notebook with me. I learned my lesson, carry a notebook and a pen, always, because I never know when it's going to strike. And it is literally a strike. And here you are, do something with it. And you think, oh, I better write this down. I've got nothing to write it down. So memo to Kez all the time. Take a notebook.
Absolutely. Although I use my phone a lot for that. I mean, that's the thing that, unless I'm driving, of course, I can do it. And if I'm sitting somewhere, I may not write out the whole poem, but if the words come and I want to capture it, I'll just either write it as a note or, in fact, email myself so that the next time I sit down, I at least have those words in front of me. But I also carry papers, like I have a poem written by hand that just came to me that I wrote down. So it's about having something at your disposal at all times.
Do you have a favorite place where you like to write poetry?
Do I have a favorite place? I would say looking out a window is probably when it happens the most often. I don't know that is a dedicated place, but usually somehow windows tend to be very inspiring in a way. I think they somehow are channeled to creativity.
What about like the shapes of windows? There's tall, there's round, there's all sorts of shapes of windows. I find that inspiring. I'd want to actually write a poem or a book on poetry called Windows. How's that? There you go.
There you go.
There you go. Between two poets, there you go.
I think you need to write that one down, Kez.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. We'll just cut the show there and let Kez write that poetry out. That's the way to do it though, girls. When the creativity strikes, you have to make the most of that time because you never know when it's going to come again. For some people, for other authors that we've spoken to, their process, they can actually go, I'm going to write from 4 a.m. till 6 a.m. and then I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then I'm going to write again from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So some people write that, but I know, Kez, you just write when you need to write, and Sonee, you're saying you write when you need to write. And there's not, so some people seem to be really disciplined and others seem to be really tap into their creative flow in a different way. Some people need to write in a certain space, like they have an office where that's where they have to write, and others are like scribbling notes down on serviettes and what have you. Do you and I know some others actually speak out their content onto their phone or a little recorder of some description. So there seems to be a lot of different ways in which the creation of the poetry and the novels happens. Do you have a favourite though, Sonee? Is the window scene a kind of a favourite space, creative space for you?
There's a window in front of me. There's a window behind me.
Yes.
And where I'm sitting right now, this is where I work the most. But I really don't have a particular place. I mean, I am one of those people who will be writing on a napkin or a Post-it or a piece of paper. And often for me to sit down, I will have scraps of paper that, then I have to polish. I also write kind of off the seat of my pants. I don't create a story and write the story from start to finish. I sort of just see what comes out and then I start piecing it together. And so I think I am able to be more adaptable in the writing, and I also don't have specific times. I let the writing come when it comes. Although that being said, if I decide I need to sit down at 2:00 and start writing, I can do it. But I usually just tend to go with what is happening in the day. Yeah.
And Kez spoke before about that hour between 2 and 3 in the morning, which lots of spiritual people talk about that as being a very creative space. Are you ever woken up during the night with creative ideas flowing?
I am, and that's when the phone also becomes very useful, because if I don't somehow write it down, I either will lose sleep and not be able to go back to sleep because then it stays in my head, or I'm afraid that the thought will be gone. I will forget it. And I also don't want to have to wake up to turn on a light, whereas the phone, immediately you can just grab it and write the thoughts.
Yes.
So that's what I tend to do. But it doesn't happen to me often. It happens to me every once in a while. So it's not a regular thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
Showers are other places that happens.
Oh, a bath. Yeah. Amazing. I've never had so many soggy poems in all my life.
I just had a vision of a beautiful big bubble bath and Kez madly writing.
Don't get the vision out of your head. Not pretty.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous,
it is beautiful because I had the same
vision.
image go in my head. So
It's the bubbles. So Tony, sorry, Sonee, we're getting off the subject, girls. Me and the bar. Stop. Sonee, read me a poem, please, from one of your books. A little short piece, if you can.
Definitely. So this is one of the first poems I actually wrote. And if I haven't said this already, a lot of the poetry that I wrote came at the beginning of COVID, when we were just starting to go into lockdowns. I was spending a lot of time alone, and I think that's why I was able to open into this introspective place. And so this one is called All Is Well. All is well, I am meant to feel, despite the numbers, rising fear and anger, inequity and injustice. Shake the world, a hurricane, tornado, typhoon, clearing the space for kindness, inclusivity, and harmony. It's what we need, an accepting community, a compassionate must, to get everything back. All is well.
That's nice. It's deep.
Oh.
It's very deep. Yeah. Now, if you were in a poetry room, they'd be doing this, because that's really good. Yeah. Have you ever seen like a poetry room? When they approve, they all click their fingers. And the first time I went to one, I thought, what are they doing? What are they doing? Way of recording. Do you attend poetry slams, Sonee?
Sorry?
Do you attend poetry slams?
I have virtually. The thing is, poetry was something that came to me when the start of COVID. And so I haven't really attended a lot of live events, but I have done virtual ones. And they're a lot of fun. I mean, those were times when I realized that, even if you get part of this sort of inspiration of just hearing from other people and sharing poetry, which I think is absolutely wonderful.
It certainly is, yeah. There's a with MMH, is it Kelly Van Nelson? Have you ever met Kelly?
I have not met her, but I have read her poetry book.
Yeah, so she runs a lot of poetry slams, and I know they're global. They're amazing. Some of her different poetry to yours, and I find that also amazing, that we're all so different. When we write, we're all so different, and yet it's all one big sisterhood, really.
It is. It is, and I think that's the beauty of, in fact, any form of writing, is that everything is so different, and whatever it is that you're expressing, it's your experience or your view or your perspective, and it's just so beautiful to see the range of everything that becomes available. I mean, there is something for everyone out there.
That's right. Yeah. Tony, you had a question.
I do. When I was prepping for the program, there was a lovely little poem that you liked by Ganya White, and so I thought I'd quickly read it to the audience, and then I'll ask you about it. So this little poem goes: what if our religion was each other? If our practice was our life? If prayer was our words? If the temple was the earth? If the forests were our church? If holy water, the rivers, lakes, and oceans? What if meditation was our relationships? If the teacher was life? If wisdom was self-knowledge, if love was the center of our being. Why do you like that poem? I love it, incidentally, by the way. The first time I
Me
read it, I
too.
thought, oh, we have to put that on the show because it has such a depth within it. Why is that your favorite, Sonny?
It's my favorite for many, many reasons. I think it embraces humanity and it embraces us as people connected to the earth. A lot of times, I think we have this perception of we're separate, separate from each other, separate from nature, as if they're two different things. We sometimes seek to judge rather than see the commonality.
Yeah.
And so it's when I remember when the first time I read the poem and I countered it, to me it felt so beautiful because I I think what it's seeking to do is connect us and see that
Yeah.
we're all the same and we have more similarities than we recognize, and we also have a reverence for where we are currently, and that's enough rather than trying to look for it outside of ourselves or elsewhere. And that's why I adore that poem. I mean, it's something that I come back to on a regular basis.
Yeah. It's when I read it, I'm just like, oh goodness, that's sort of my vision for what humanity or what we need to head towards as a human existence, where we understand how connected we are not only to each other but to the earth itself, and that we need to really be protecting each other and earth and be connected for us to survive as human
Okay.
beings.
Mm.
And I wonder if COVID is not the great precursor to a more connected humanity, and more of that idea about protecting each other and protecting the earth and making sure that it goes on for our grandkids and our grandkids, which caused me to think of all of those things when I first read that poem. With your background, I'm wondering if you, that sense of being connected to Mother Earth, let's just call it Mother Earth, that sense of being connected to Mother Earth, that actually is part and parcel of those modalities, isn't it? So it's about the energy of crystals, it's about the life force of humans, it's about making sure that those energies are free flowing. Do you find that brings those concepts come through from your practice to your writing?
Yes, I think part of that knowledge is within us. And I think the moment that we start opening it ourselves up to the reality that everything has energy and everything impacts one another, and that in seeing, for instance, somebody heal, even if you're just healing yourself, you're opening up that ability in all of us to heal. So that is definitely something that I've seen through the practices that I've had, and it is something that I also try to bring into my writing. And I remember, in fact, and I think it was during the Reiki course that I took, which was one of the first modalities that I learned. And that was in saying that the moment that you open up yourself to healing, you open up the world to healing. And we tend to think that, we as individuals don't necessarily make an impact. Like sometimes that we have to do something big in order to impact the world. And really, the moment that you start healing yourself, you're opening up the world to also heal, because it's one less hurt person walking around, or one less diseased person walking around. And so that is, part of what you open yourself up to the more that you explore, I think, healing modalities. And so yes, that very much so.
I agree.
I've been it's a wonderful subject to talk about because I've just been listening to a whole series of trauma movies and talks by Dr. Gabrielle Maté, about trauma and the healing of trauma, and the concept that there are so many humans that are hurt and traumatized, that we actually are not starting from a clear, healed space, and we need to get back to that idea that we have the capacity to heal ourselves, that we have the wisdom and knowledge to do that, and that we need to be more focused on that healing, because once humans start to heal, and then we have that capacity to heal Mother Earth, so to speak, and to stop things like pollution and all the rest of it. And I guess that's the power of poetry and poetry writing, is some of those concepts can be very deeply entwined in your work, Sonee.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why just having an openness is so important, because we tend to look at other people and look at the differences first rather than have a compassionate place. And I think the more that you express compassion, whether it's through poetry or other forms of writing, hopefully that helps bring a bigger amount of understanding, and that we're all in this together. And in a way, we have all experienced hurt and trauma and terrible situations, and in having that ability to give people the space to heal, we help each other in that process. And yeah, I mean, you can express a lot of that through poetry and through writing.
Definitely. So there's in your life, in your poetry life, you, from what I'm hearing, in your poetry life, well, it's not really a poetry life, it's a writer's life, isn't it? You can't divide the two. It's a writer's life. Yeah. So I actually read one of your books coming up, and I realized then that just how very deeply that you consider calling us planet home, our Earth, we call it home, and how deeply you consider friendships. And that came across to me in your poetry as well.
Just because I see, I do consider things a lot. I'm a thinker.
Yes, yeah.
I'm a thinker, I'm an introspector, I'm contemplative. And so I do look at, the world around me, and that includes everything. That includes nature, that includes earth, that includes family, that includes friendships. I think in particular with COVID, it provided a chance for us to not take relationships for granted. And this was something that I reflected a lot in the poetry book and embody, because I was alone when I wrote the poems. I have since moved in with my parents, so I'm not by myself anymore. But the first 4 months, which is when a lot of the poetry came out of me, or when I wrote a lot of it. And so in being isolated, you really consider who your friends are, why they're your friends, what makes a friendship, what makes a relationship, what makes family, what doesn't. And a lot of that is reflected in what I put out. So yes, I did consider it a lot. And it is something that has stayed with me since I've written the poems. And I think, even in terms of healing and looking at other people, you really consider what makes a person be joyous, or what makes a person be who they are. And that is something that I also try to bring about in the poem.
There was a couple of poems there. I haven't got the book in front of me at the moment, but a couple of poems there that showed absolute respect for your friendships and your family, because they were written with great respect. And anyone that doesn't write would not, I don't think they'd pick it up. But anyone that is a writer in any form, even if you're a writer with the government, even if you're a scribe with the government, the respect was there, and I really appreciated reading it because it unfolded. I know that the word that you called the book wasn't unfolded, but I felt like it was unfolding me in caring and sharing, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And if I may, I actually have a poem that I wrote that was in terms of connections. Ironically, the title of the poem is called Journey to Self-Love, but it actually encompasses a lot of what we've been discussing. It's sort of a self-reflection. It's a look at how connections and people are there for you at certain points when you need them, and how, we're part of this earth. So if you allow me, I'll just read it real quick.
Sure.
Yes. It's called Journey to Self-Love. Through every bump, burn, and scratch, wrinkle and pimple, stretching near and far, I have been with you. In every curl, whisk, and fizz, blimp and dimple, crowning me into oblivion, I have been with you. Every time I was left waiting, withdrawn and taunted, not wanting to be put down, let down, I have been with you. Through every trip and discovery, connection and relation, a forced journey of awakening, I have been with you. Everything I have for me and from me, the life I have lived, I have been with you. Every time I stand up to be myself and who I am, all the love around me, I have been with you.
Oh, that's deep. That's lovely.
That's beautiful. Just beautiful. Sonee, do you think that this whole pandemic, I feel, is as terrible as it's been and as traumatic as it has been for many people? I actually feel like it's something that we needed to have. It's almost like humanity was forced to sit with ourselves, to accept something that has caused great change across the planet. And I actually feel like it's been a time for people to be introspective, to look at where they are in life and examine what's important. And I know from listening to lots of different things across media and in business that lots of people are actually doing that. They're actually going, well, no, I don't want to live in a city anymore. I want to live in the country, or I don't want to commute to work. I want to work from home. Do you feel like it's something that humanity needed to have to slow us down and cause us to reflect? Because there's lots of amazing art, music, writings, poetry coming out of this time, as I believe there will be great innovation and technology as well. What do you think, Sonee?
I do agree with you. I think. Sorry.
You go. I was going to ask you first and then ask Kez for her opinion as well.
I mean, I do agree. And I think, because we had all this time to be at home and evaluate what was important and what wasn't important, I think it's almost like you didn't have a choice but to consider what was worthwhile, what you enjoyed and what you didn't enjoy. And I see it around me in that I see so many people either starting to write, or those people who had an intention but never had the time, all of a sudden making the time, and finding that they value the things that they're doing for themselves, or the things that they find meaningful. And it's interesting, at least in the city where I live, you see a lot of help wanted signs, and there's a lot of advertisements for work, and there doesn't seem to be people who want to take them. But I think it's because people are now saying, is that really what I want to do? Or is there something better that I can do for myself, or something that will be more fulfilling rather than, just a job to pay the bills? So I do feel that that's something that is being shared by us as a whole.
I think fulfilling is the word. I really do. It's just over here in Australia, I find that people are heading for the country, bringing their kids up with chickens and goats and lambs and goodness knows what sort of animals, teaching them more grounding ways, more fulfilling life. Nothing more fulfilling than going out and an egg up that's still warm, or feeding the animals in the morning. And Tony, you would know more about that than me. I've got a big garden out the back. I actually go and talk to my to my plants, not my animals. But it's a crazy lady in the neighborhood talks to her plants. But I do agree that fulfilling is the actual connection word here. Just watching how and making ourselves more global. Then we're working from home, so we're shut in a room, so we don't see what's going on outside. And I've seen the change in my neighbors and their children. I've seen when the lockdown was on, I had this massive 3-car driveway, so I invited the children to come into the driveway and draw. I supplied the chalk, so I would stay in the window inside and wave to them while they drew me pictures. It was a way of still keeping that connection up. So fulfilling for me, I don't have my grandchildren here in Australia, so it was fulfilling for me. And I found a lot of other people were sharing their plants, sharing their food, dropping it off at the doorway, sharing their toilet paper, even dropping it off at the doorway. I was being asked questions because my husband and I were looked upon as the senior ones in a very young neighborhood, and that made me think outside the box. They really care. They really do care. Because before it was, hi, how you going? And into the car and off. And we were all to blame. There was no fulfilling our role as it used to be once, when we all had nanas and granddads, cousins, and that we used to go to their place and celebrate together. And that's been lost over the years. We just go on Zoom now and say, Merry Christmas, how you going? See you later. But that needs to come back. That's the fulfilling part of it. So I agree entirely with you. I think the COVID thing has been meant to happen. I really do.
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, and I can't come to any other conclusion rather, that it's a time in history that we needed to happen. And I kind of, for everyone that's sort of fighting against it, or thinking that it's the worst thing that's ever happened, actually I can't see anything but good that will come out of it in so many ways, particularly again around the arts of writing and painting and creating and sculpting and technology and invention, and because we need to have that space for great things to transpire. And I kind of get a bit excited to think of what might come out of this time, because we won't see it for a little while, but 2 years down the track we might be looking at amazing new technology.
Yes, you will.
There'll certainly be amazing books and poetry and art, because I've seen that. Just, that's almost a given. But I think that's a good thing for the earth. Sonee, what do you think?
I do agree. And I think what's interesting is, at least from my own experience and that of the people that I've kept in touch with during this time, is that, at the beginning, when we were first facing lockdown, you were sitting there endlessly streaming whatever it was, Netflix or whatever it may happen to be. But that got old very quickly. And so then you were kind of forced to find other ways to either entertain yourself. And I think that's what sparked people into wanting to bake or wanting to cook at home. And, and all sorts of kinds of expression, or write, or, have other forms of connection. And Kez mentioned Zoom, but I think in a way Zoom has also been a great connector, because you were able to touch base with people and make time for people that you perhaps wouldn't. Like, I have a group of friends that we all went to college together, and since COVID started, we've made it a commitment to speak to each other once a week. Which never would have happened, because out of the group of us, every single person lives in a different city around the world. We don't normally connect in the same way, but now we had the time, and we still continue it, even though, in some places people are more open and starting to kind of travel and go out, but we still continue it. And that's one of the things that you can see as an example, that there's beauty that's coming out of this, and connection and
that's what
I agree. Yeah. I agree entirely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Think that there are the good that that will come out of this. I'm hoping will outweigh the terrible toll that the pandemic has had on the world, and there has been a toll in terms of human life and mental illness and all the rest of it. But I think that it will be for the greater good eventually.
Yes.
Kez, we're just about out of time, and you've got one final question for the lovely Sonee. What is it?
The next book, Sonee. I think I know the answer to this one. What's the next book, Sonee?
Yes. So Embody is actually the first of a collection of 3 poetry books. And all of the poems were written over the same or similar time period, so they're all linked. This book, this collection, Embody, was about sort of coming to terms with what was happening, and really an expression of what was happening within. The next 2 books, which are Embrace and Embolden, are sort of that progression of that experience. Embracing was just that acceptance, of saying, okay, well, here I am. This is the reality, or this is the new reality. And Embolden is more of how to have that help move us forward, or help, in my perspective and what was happening, help kind of the process forward. And so those 2 books should be coming out soon. I don't have dates yet, but they're in the works.
That's fabulous. Yeah, can't wait for them. It's just beautiful. Congratulations.
Lovely book.
And you came to be a bestseller?
I did, surprisingly so. Woo-hoo! I reached #1 in women's poetry in Amazon, Australia, in the first week, which was incredible.
Of course.
I had no idea that was going to happen, but so excited for that.
Yes. Amazing. Fantastic. What happens. Yeah, it's amazing. And you're well done. Now, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I'm really glad that people are reading and embracing poetry, particularly yours, Sonee. It's just really, really wonderful. Just a quick mention that for those of you listening live, we have all of Sonee's links that will go into the chat box. But Sonee, can you tell us, please, the best place to get your first poetry book, Embody?
Well, I have links to where you can find them. Right now, they're only on Kindle. The print version is coming out soon, and that can be purchased. So there's several versions, but there's a collector's edition that is a hardcover. That's what I have here.
Beautiful.
And there will eventually be a paperback or softcover edition as well, but they are not out yet. And the links for all of that are on my website. And so if you go on my website, they'll link you to the Amazon page where you can get the Kindle version, and to the page where you can pre-order the hardcover books. So SoneeSingh.com.
Yeah, I was just going to say, SoneeSingh.com. That's just like poetry itself. It's a beautiful, beautiful name. It just rolls off the tongue. Lovely ladies, we are just about out of time. Sonee, thank you so much for sharing with us again.
Thank you for
conversation with Kez. It's just beautiful to have you to talk about poetry, which it doesn't get a lot of airplay, and I'm so glad that we get to talk to you about it today. Kez, thank you for co-hosting a conversation with Kez with me again this week. It's wonderful to talk to you each and every week. Lovely ladies, thank you so much. That's the show for this week. We will be back next week with another conversation with Kez and my co-host Kez Wickham St. George. George. Don't forget to jump on to soneesing.com and find the links to her amazing poetry books. And Kez Wickham St. George also has her links to all her books, and she has the third in her series coming out very soon, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Lovely ladies, thank you so much for today. That's our lot for this week. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.